very much, Greg. Okay. So let me start with a show of hands. Actually, how many people have actually test driven an electric vehicle? Pretty good. And how many do that actually own an electric vehicle? So I'm just going to start with something pretty interesting. The last time I was here in Dallas, I was actually at a Wall Street Journal moderated panel. And so after my presentation was over, this gentleman came running over to the stage and he said, Arun, you forgot to mention something very important. Yes? He said, you have to tell everybody how much fun it is to drive an EV. And he goes, you know what? I have a Porsche that I traded in for a Nissan Leaf. And he said, I've never regretted a day. So I thought this time around I'd start with how much fun it is to drive an EV. If you have not had the experience, go out to your nearest dealer and drive one. Okay. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about some of the huge policy implications about electric vehicles. I've got just one slide about what is a power company doing in this space. I'll give you a little context about why we got into this space, how we got into this space, and finally a few slides on our business model. Okay? So bear with me. You can read that at your leisure. So EV opportunity. Historically, in the early 1900s, electric vehicles were around 1/3 of the total cars in the United States. Okay? So the technology has been there for a very long time. It is coming back again. Just for context, in the United States, we sell on average anywhere from 12 to 16 million cars. This year, we're going to have a total of probably 18,000 electric vehicles. So it's just starting. And the reason it's only 18,000 is more because of supply than for demand. But a lot of auto manufacturers and battery manufacturers are investing billions of dollars into this technology. And this is what we believe the projections are from different auto manufacturers for how many electric vehicles are going to be in the market. By the year 2020, they're projecting around 1.6 million cars. But there's all kinds of views out there. You know, there's some people who say by the year 2020, EVs are going to be so efficient and so much cleaner and so much lower cost. Why would anybody buy anything different? So there's a whole slew of perspectives out there about electric vehicles. We believe that electric vehicles are probably one of the most disruptive technologies that are out there today that have huge impacts on us as individuals, as a nation, and as a society. First of all, look at this picture about emissions. You know, in the political agenda, or even in business these days, people have stopped talking about climate change, right? Because there's so many questions about climate change. But there is no debate about air emissions. Air emissions is something very real. In Houston, where I'm from, 37% of all the air emissions is due to tailpipe emissions. In the Bay Area, it's 50%. And just think about all of the effects on health, on jobs, there are a lot of negative implications about air emissions. Look at gasoline. This is the level of emissions due to gasoline. This is on grams per mile. And in fact, we actually had to change the CO2 into kilograms for this bar chart to even fit on this page. Now, in comparison, look at solar, wind, hydro, or nuclear. Zero emissions, right? Because the question always comes, okay, so electric vehicles are cleaner, but what if electric vehicles are powered from coal? Or you know, don't we run a dirty grid? Okay? Even when you run an electric vehicle on 100% coal, it is still much cleaner than running it on gasoline. Okay? A typical Texas grid, this is what a Texas grid emissions will be like. This is what what is the combination data. And look at that versus the air emissions from gasoline. So electric vehicles are really, really important from a societal perspective. And what is more important is that we do not have to change our lifestyle. In fact, we enhance our lifestyle with electric vehicles. So we're not giving up anything with EVs, right? People then talk about cost. Yes, but it costs a lot more. So I just turned to this Bloomberg source. This is fairly recent. That is in fact comparing, for some reason it doesn't seem to project over here again. So it's comparing the Nissan Leaf at a 31,000 plus sticker price with a Toyota Prius hybrid, Ford Fusion, gasoline, Chevy Volt, and Lexus hybrid. And when you look at a total cost of ownership, okay, already today, the EV is your lowest cost alternative even at $3 a gallon gas. Today, it's your cheapest alternative. Why? Think about all of the maintenance you don't have to do. Okay? You never have to get an oil change again, right? There's a lot of parts that are just not needed in an electric vehicle. Think about an operating cost. Okay? To drive a 20 mile per gallon gasoline vehicle, 12,000 miles a year at $4 a gallon gas, that'll cost you $2,400 a year, just your gasoline. Okay? To drive the same equivalent 12,000 miles on an electric vehicle will take 3,000 kilowatt hours, and at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, $300 a year. $2,400 versus $300. And that's why EVs are already today your cheapest alternative. But the challenge is, how do you get people to start thinking in terms of total cost of ownership rather than just the sticker price? That is the challenge, right? National security. So we as a nation export around $1 billion a day. Many of that to countries with whom we'd probably rather not even deal with, right? More than $1 billion a day. We have been talking about energy security since President Carter. Every president is talking about energy security, right? $339 billion is how much we exported in 2010. That accounts for 60%, 60% of our trade imbalance. Okay? Now, the other question people talk about is all these trillions of dollars we're spending on wars, whether that be in Iraq or Afghanistan. The RAND Corporation, which is a very conservative think tank, this is their numbers. Forget about wars. We spend on any normal non-war year $75 billion a year just to keep our oil lanes open. $75 billion a year. Okay? And how much did we spend on subsidies for electric vehicles in 2010? $1 billion. Now think about the politics in Washington. Which number do you think the super committee is focusing on right now? I don't think I have to answer that question, right? Yeah. But it has huge national security implications for us as a nation. I just have one slide. I don't know how much people are familiar with the charging. People talk about chargers, and there's a lot of confusion out there in the market. So I just thought I'd put one slide on. People ask about what is going to be the effect on the grid. You can charge your EV with a level 1 charger. A level 1 is your regular socket in your home. You have a lot of those. You can charge them. It's the equivalent of a hair dryer. Okay, but it's slow charge. It gives you 6 miles per hour of charge. Now, if you don't have a long commute, if you commute 10 miles, 20 miles a day, you probably park your car at home for 10 hours a day, you get 60 miles, you're probably fine with a level 1 charge. A lot of people have level 2 charges. Now, it's 240 volt, it's equivalent to a clothes dryer. That's how much it demands on the grid. And that gives you 12 miles of range in an hour. And then there's companies like Ford coming out with a 6.6 kilowatt level charger capable dock in their cars, which gives you 24 miles per hour. Okay? And then there's the DC chargers. For our fast everything society, this is what people are looking for, is a fast charge, right? This gives you 15 minutes, 50 miles, 50. So very fast charge. And it's equivalent to building of this size. By the way, this is our eVgo headquarters. Even though we're a large corporation, NRG, we're a Fortune 300 corporation, we wanted to be in a startup. We're in a startup mode, so we want to be in our own building. This used to be the Hummer building in Houston. So it's an item. So it's very iconic. We've gone from Hummers to electric vehicles in the same building. So I just a little bit about context. I was talking outside this event, and there's quite a number of folks from the startup world. So I just want to give kind of perspective on what is NRG and why is NRG in this space and what are we doing in this space, right? So NRG is a Fortune 300 company, $6 billion market cap, publicly listed company. And just a little bit on how we as a company have actually transformed ourselves. Energy, for those in the business, it's a very capital intensive industry. And changes don't happen overnight. These power plants, once you build them, they're good for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. You cannot just shut them down. Right? So what can you do? Well, what the choices you have is, what are you doing with your new investments, right? So 3 years ago, we decided we'd move NRG, our strategy would be moving clean energy forward. And we would reduce the amount of our earnings from carbon-based sources. So maximize our earnings from non-carbon generating sources, right? So at that time, when we started, we had around 23,000 megawatts of generation, gas, coal, nuclear, you name it, 23,000 megawatts. Today, we're still growing that portfolio. So we have today 25,000 megawatts. But all of the changes that you see on this page are from in those 3 years. We are today the largest investor in the world in solar. We have committed $1.5 billion in solar. Okay? We own around 500 megawatts of wind in West Texas. We own now 3 retail companies: Reliant Energy, Green Mountain Energy, and Energy Plus. Together around 2 million customers. We in fact have an energy technology venture fund that we opened with General Electric and ConocoPhillips as partners. It's a $300 million venture fund to invest in clean tech companies. And we have a couple of now companies in the auto space or the intersection of the auto and the energy space, eVgo and EV2G. EV2G is another really interesting company. It's a vehicle to grid. We partner with the University of Delaware, and we are in fact doing real transactions within the grid in the Northeast. And we have done real transactions that have resulted in around $200 of revenue per car. So imagine the possibilities with these electric vehicles, because a little factoid for you here. Average commute in the US is 31 miles per day, okay? A car sits parked somewhere on average 23 hours a day. Now you take that same car, if it's an electric vehicle and you're connecting it to a charger, you now have all kinds of two-way communication possibilities, right? You now have opened up a whole world of possibilities about vehicle to grid. These 1.6 million cars, electric vehicles I talked about earlier, those could be 1.6 million generating sources. You could be, your cars could be revenue sources, the $200 a month I talked about. Think about the possibilities, right? Nissan in Japan, after Fukushima, when parts of the country had no power for weeks at a time, they are now introducing a vehicle to home application whereby if the power goes down, you actually use your car as a power source for your home. Now, Texas, lights don't go out all the time, but during hurricane season, there may be applications there as well, right? So it really opens up a whole slew of possibilities. We have a lot of solar and wind power. Those are intermittent sources. So the ability to store those with these batteries and to use them as needed. Again, a lot of applications with batteries, and the fact that you connect these cars 23 hours, up to maybe 23 hours a day. So we saw all of those possibilities with electric vehicles and all of the applications in our energy space, and that's the reason why we said we got to invest in this space. So once we made the decision to invest, the question was, okay, what is our value proposition, right? What are we trying to solve for the consumer? How do we enter into this space? And much more importantly, being a publicly listed company, we have to make sure that we are providing returns to our shareholders. So we thought there were 3 things we could resolve, right? First, range anxiety. Everybody talks about range anxiety. Paul, I'm sure you have your moments as well. And so, you know, we have answers for range anxiety, and this is our answer for range anxiety, okay? I know Dallas has many bragging rights. You can add this as another bragging right. This is the first DC charger in the nation in Dallas. It's on Walgreens, at Walgreens in Bedline. Okay? It's the first one in the nation. That's another bragging rights for Dallas. So this is a level 2 charger. This is a DC charger, very fast. This picture actually is from Houston. We opened this in September. We opened the one in Dallas in April of this year. And it's at HEB. So, you know, you go into HEB for 15 minutes, you get 50 miles of range, right? We even have a customer service tower with a 24-hour camera, lighting, and all that kind of thing. So we've got now, so far, 3 of these Freedom stations open. One of the lessons learned as a startup and one of the first in this space, we have a lot of ideas. Technology is behind. Technology is trying to catch up, but it will catch up. We're very confident it will catch up. And so our constraint is just the availability of the technology. So we have committed to installing 50 Freedom stations. That's what we call that a Freedom station, all of that together. Freedom from oil, freedom from a lot of things, right? So that's why we named it a Freedom station. So we've committed to 50 of these in Houston, 70, because Dallas-Fort Worth together is a larger ecosystem. So 70 of those in Dallas Fort Worth is what we committed to. So that should resolve everybody's range anxiety problem, right? Now, there were 2 other things we thought we could help with. Upfront cost. So these chargers, even after you buy a car, it can cost you anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000. That's a significant cost, right? And so one of the things we're doing is financing that cost. And the final one is cost of ownership. You know, even when gasoline prices go up or down, people have a pretty good idea about how much it's going to mean for their pocketbooks on a monthly basis. You know, maybe $60, $150. On average, households spend around $150 to $200 per month. But people have no idea about kilowatt hours, miles, and cost. They do not have the vaguest idea. And so we came up with a subscription model. So we borrowed from the telecom industry, we borrowed from the cable box industry. We amortize everything into a subscription package so that with subscriptions and with renewals, this is a viable business model. Now, obviously, it has to scale up. At 18,000 EVs a year, it's not a viable business model. But as you scale up, it now becomes something a very, very viable business model. And one of the instructions I was given was stay away from commercials. So I'm just trying to stay as far away from commercials as possible on our business model. So I'm just going to try to stick to the business model itself. Okay. So I showed that, and we went through that. And the really interesting thing that we find ourselves right now is we're almost the only company that's thinking about this from the perspective of building a total ecosystem. We're not hardware providers, we're not manufacturers, we're more developers, financiers, operators. So we're really putting ourselves in the shoes of an EV driver and saying, how can we make it as easy as possible for EV drivers, right? So besides your home charge, we have workplace charging, multi-family charging opportunities. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of the kind of innovative things we're doing with this business model. So people go on business trips, right? So what do you do when you go to a business trip? Do you take your electric vehicle? Well, right now, probably not possible in Dallas, right? So in Houston, at the parking flag, there's a couple of chargers. So you go in there, they do not charge you anything more. If you are a subscriber, you just go in there, plug it in, go on your business trip, come back to a fully charged EV, you can drive home. We are going to be installing those at the Park and Fly here in Dallas DFW Airport as well. Another thing that we really thought about a lot about is okay, everybody thinks about EVs as your second or your third car. So is there a way we can actually make EVs, if somebody is really committed for whatever reason, cost, environmental sustainability, or energy independence reasons, they want to just drive an EV and they can afford only one car. So how do we resolve that? So what we did was we paired up with Hertz. So it's not in implementation yet. We've signed an agreement, and the reason it's not in implementation yet is just because of the lack of EVs, right? So the way it would work is our subscribers would get half-price rentals at Hertz. So when you need to drive from Dallas to Houston today, you're not going to drive an EV, right? Don't. So what you would do is you would go to your nearest Hertz, plug it in. You'd have your EV chargers there. You plug it in your car. You drive with your gasoline fuel car. Half-price rental. You come back to Hertz, return your car, and drive your EV home. Now suddenly, when you're pairing an EV with a gasoline fuel car with the likes of Hertz or Enterprise or others, you can actually get by with just one car without being an electric vehicle. And so those are just the kind of examples that I'm giving you of how we're thinking about really building an EV ecosystem. Okay? Consumer awareness is huge. And I tell folks, for the next couple of years, for all of us who are in this space, we're all car salespeople, ultimately. Whatever our business model may be, because it's important to get EVs out there, so we're all car salespeople for the next couple of years. And we do a lot of surveys. So people going to Dallas Auto Show or Houston Auto Show, the rodeo, and we ask people questions like, how many of you would even consider buying an EV as part of your next auto purchase? And typically the answer we get is 15–20%, even consider. Okay? We spend a lot of time and effort on consumer awareness. So just in Dallas, Fort Worth, and in Houston between July 4th and Thanksgiving, we're in over 60 consumer-facing events. And what we typically do is take our eVgo tent, a couple of electric vehicles like the ones you see outside there, a couple of charging stations, a network map of where all these charging stations are going to be, and then we do a post-event survey. And when we ask the same question, how many of you would even consider buying an electric vehicle, that number jumps up to typically between 55–60%. So consumer awareness becomes huge. And what we've noticed time and time again, and that's why I asked the question right at the front, how many of you have actually driven an EV? It's a totally different experience talking with people who've actually driven an EV versus those who have not. Because psychologically, a lot of people still think of EVs as a golf cart. Okay? And until they sit in them, until they drive one, it's just not the same. Okay? But once you drive, a lot of people are saying, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna, I don't need another car right now, but in 2 years from now, when I'm actually thinking about buying a car, I'm gonna definitely consider that serious. It's a totally different change in mindset. So we spend a lot of time in consumer awareness. And finally, just to give you a sense, again, as I said earlier, we're developers, financiers, operators. We don't manufacture the technology. So we had to have a lot of partnerships when we started out. And we've just been in the business for around a year. In fact, our first sales was last year, November, on Thanksgiving Day, was our first. And now we've got around 9 or total of 10 Freedom stations. We're building out the network. We've got all of our back office set up. We've got a call center, all those millions of things you need to do in order to be a consumer-facing organization. But we still could not have done it without all these partners. So for retail hosts, we have partners like Walgreens, HEB, Best Buy, Central Market, part of HEB. We have all these auto industry manufacturers as our partners. We've got a very interesting business model. Even though we are an power company, we want to make sure we can serve everybody, because in the United States there's over 3,000 utilities. Okay? And each utility is very protective of its own franchise area. So how do you go into those franchise areas? So we've actually Green Mountain Energy and Reliant, those are part of the NRG family. But interestingly, NRG Energy is a partner of ours. So Hertz and Park and Fly, as I mentioned before. So I'm going to end there and take questions. There's a lot more information on eVgoNetwork.com. There's a couple of people here. Jason, raise your hand, and Ross. They're based in Dallas. They're in eVgo. Reach out to them if you have any questions at all. David Knox is with the team as well. So there's a lot of people that you can ask questions to as well. Right, sir? Yes, sir.
My name is Robert Potter, and I'd like to say that I think the fundamental idea of an electric vehicle, to find one, I think you have a barrier to entry, however. And I have written a letter to President Obama, 4 pages long. I've had the opportunity to present to Stephen Chu, the Secretary of Energy, and I propose